Hello everyone, welcome to Psych, and today I want to talk about the various approaches to personality typology such as MBTI and Socionics and the differences between them. If you've been in the MBTI community for a while, you'll know that there's a lot of confusion and conflict over what is right or wrong in terms of personality typology. What does a cognitive function mean? What does its place in a function stack mean? And today I want to talk about the differences in the systems of personality typology and what each one of them can bring to the table. Let's get into it. So to understand personality typology, we first have to understand the origins of personality typology in context of the cognitive functions and the Myers-Briggs system. So the cognitive functions were created by the psychiatrist Carl Jung, and Carl Jung originally envisioned the 8 cognitive functions as almost like a portrait of a person. Each cognitive function represented a person that was of that type. They were someone who only used that cognitive function, and that's how he wrote about the 8 functions, as if they were a person who only used that one specific function. The difference between this and modern systems is that Carl Jung's original vision didn't include things such as secondary functions, so we didn't have a wide variety of types and how they interacted with the other functions in their stack. This wouldn't come to be until Myers-Briggs developed her personality type system, which evolved his 8 cognitive functions into 16 total personality types, and included things such as the auxiliary, tertiary, and repressed function. So the main idea with Carl Jung's personality system was that he believed that we had a dominant cognitive function that represented a large majority of our personality. But alongside that, he also recognized that we had a repressed function, one that is going to struggle because we put so much effort into our dominant cognitive function. He believed that the functions were linked on an axis and that if we were to put more into one, we would have less of another. And this kind of created the 8 personality types that he originally envisioned. Now, Carl Jung also spoke about the importance of balancing one's self out with a secondary function, but he did not talk in detail about this. He primarily spoke about the dominant and repressed functions. This is where the Myers-Briggs system comes into place, because the Myers-Briggs system takes the 8 functions that Carl Jung created and pairs them with an auxiliary function, one in the opposite attitude of the dominant function, which creates the 16 personality types that we know today. So the core concept of Jung is that we have a dominant cognitive function and a repressed function, and these do not change. They exist in one attitude for our entire lives. Now, when you look at the Briggs system, we have 4 cognitive functions that exist in one attitude and do not change. So, for example, we cannot have someone with introverted feeling who also has extroverted feeling because it exists in one attitude. This then is changed by the model that came out in around the 70s called Socionics. And Socionics proposed that we used all 8 cognitive functions in various positions based on our type. And this was because they believed that we used all sides of the mind and that we were going to be able to use both introverted and extroverted feeling. This strays very far from Carl Jung's original work and is the largest difference between the MBTI systems and the Socionics systems, because there is this difference in the fundamental approach to what the cognitive functions mean and how they exist. Because in the MBTI and Carl Jung's original systems, they only exist in one attitude, whereas in Socionics, they exist in both depending on the placement in the function stack. Another difference between the systems is the fundamental way in which they view how cognitive functions work and what they mean. Let's look at, for example, Carl Jung's original system. Carl Jung originally envisioned that the 8 cognitive functions worked in a primarily perceptual way. And what that means is that they worked kind of like lenses. We saw the world through different lenses depending on which cognitive function we had. And this would cause us to kind of act in different ways and be stressed in different ways depending on the order in which functions we had. So then we look at the Myers-Briggs system, which changed this to a perceptual value-based model. And what that means is not only did we have different lenses in which we saw the world, but we also valued things differently because of the cognitive functions we had, such as our primary and secondary function. We had different values as people based on things such as our temperament as NT or NF types, or ST or SF types. All of these differences caused perceptual and value-based differences between and within the types. This changes even further once you reach Socionics, because Socionics tends to treat cognitive functions as perceptual, value, behavioral functions. And the entire difference in this is that because you have all 8 functions in different slots and you use them all, specific behaviors are attributed to specific functions, which is not something that you see in Carl Jung's original system or even the Myers-Briggs system, because behavior is instead a byproduct of the functions. Whereas in the Socionics model, functions are instead kind of a primary part of the way in which we behave. We behave in certain ways because we have functions in certain slots, whether it be the 7th or 8th slot in the Socionics model. And this is fundamentally different from how Carl Jung and Briggs originally viewed their version of cognitive functions. Now comes the question of which of these systems is right, which one is wrong, and are any of them better than the others? And I don't think there's a real answer to this because I don't think one of these systems can be inherently better than the other. But it is important for us to recognize the foundation that all of the newer systems come from. They all come from Carl Jung's original work. They all come from his original 8 cognitive functions, whether you're looking at an MBTI model or Socionics. And the real answer to the earlier question is that all of these systems are using his theories in new ways, because MBTI strays away from Carl Jung's original work. Socionics strays away from both Carl Jung and MBTI, and with time science evolves. This is completely normal, but it's important to make sure that we take note of the foundation and the roots that these new theories are coming from. So what I do here on this channel is I teach personality typology through the lens of Carl Jung's original works, through the book Psychological Types. Now, I believe that Carl Jung's foundation is extremely strong, and that's why I personally stick to Carl Jung's work, even more so than the Myers-Briggs model. Does that mean the way I teach personality is inherently better than anyone else's? No, I don't think so, because there's great things that can be learned from different approaches to the same topic. Take, for example, we look at people like C.S. Joseph and Eric Thor. They each have their own personality system models. C.S. Joseph has his version of Socionics, whereas Eric Thor has Neo-Jungian psychology. I wouldn't say that I entirely agree with either of these systems directly, but there are extremely valuable things that can be learned from these. There's people like Harry over at Cognitive Personality Theory who are trying to create entirely new systems by kind of only using the basics and fundamentals of Carl Jung's original cognitive functions. It's great for new ideas to evolve from the foundations of old ideas. This is great, but I personally on this channel teach classical Jungian psychology because that's what I find valuable. I think his ideas were interesting, so I do my best to present them to you all in an easy to understand way. Now, some of the biggest problems in the personality typology community tend to arise when people of 2 different personality systems try to argue essentially the same thing, and they're not going to be able to come to complete conclusions or agreeing conclusions because they have fundamentally different ways of approaching the same problem. This can even be seen with slight changes to the exact same model. Take, for example, you look at the channel Talking with Famous People host Eric, and you compare him to somebody like C.S. Joseph. They're both essentially using Socionics, but they have entirely different ways in which they view the same system. And this means that even within the same systems, there's large variations and variance in how the systems are understood. I think that the best thing someone can do if they're interested in personality typology and they want to learn more is to kind of look at the various systems of personality typology overall first. Take a bird's eye view down on all of the personality systems. Don't dive directly into one first. Instead, take a look at all of them, what they have to offer, then pick one that seems the most interesting or realistic to you and learn about that one. And then maybe once you feel extremely comfortable about the ideas that are associated with that specific system, you can move on to another one. And you might find that when you move on to the other one, you like the ideas of the second one more, and that's completely fine. You might even find that you like the first one more. That's good too. The idea is to understand the world and understand others, as well as understand yourself. And by looking at the different models of personality, you can really begin to get a complete picture of who you are as a person and who others are around you and what they mean to you. Another important thing to note is that just because somebody has fundamentally different views than you doesn't mean they're always wrong, and that doesn't mean that you can't learn something from them. Because in my opinion, a lot of the people here on YouTube who are talking about MBTI and personality typology have really interesting things to say, even if I don't entirely agree with them. And to me, it's really valuable to be able to take in the opinions and ideas of others, because I'll admit I've learned interesting things from a lot of the people here on YouTube who talk about MBTI, or I've learned how to view something from a different perspective, and that's really valuable. Some of my favorite channels are channels who talk about MBTI through different lenses that I hadn't even thought of. Take, for example, Geek Psychology, who teaches MBTI through the lens of fantasy and video games and personal growth. To me, that's really interesting. Being able to view MBTI, personality typology, Jungian theory through all of the different lenses and kind of compile all of the ideas into one real framework is going to allow you to learn a lot more about yourself compared to if you just pick one system, stick with it for its entirety, and always think other people are wrong without ever letting them speak their ideas or learning from them. All right, everybody, thanks for checking out this video on the differences between personality typology systems related to Carl Jung's cognitive functions and the MBTI. To me, I think there's a lot of core differences between the primary models of personality typology, but there's valuable things that can be learned from all of them, and that's what I want people to kind of take away from this video. Out of respect for the creators that I discussed in this video, their links to their channels will be in the description box below, so make sure to check them out if you are interested in learning more about them, because to me, some of them have really good ideas, even if I don't entirely agree with them. So I want to remind everybody that I have personality typing sessions available at my website, asurapsych.com, so check that out if you would like to have your personality assessed by me and you want to kind of learn more about yourself. This has been Asura at Asura Psych. Have a good one.